What I've learned is that the most effective people and teams in any domain do something we can all emulate. They go through life deliberately alternating between two zones, the learning zone and the performance zone. The learning zone is when our goal is to improve. Then we do activities designed for improvement, concentrating on what we haven't mastered yet, which means we have to expect to make mistakes, knowing that we will learn from them. That is very different from what we do when we're in our performance zone, which is when our goal is to do something as best as we can, to execute. Then we concentrate on what we have already mastered and we try to minimize mistakes. Both of these zones should be part of our lives, but being clear about when we want to be in each of them, with what goal, focus, and expectations, helps us better perform and better improve.
Welsh is a Celtic language spoken in Wales by about 740,000 people, and in the Welsh colony in Patagonia, Argentina by several hundred people. There are also Welsh speakers in England, Scotland, Canada, the USA, Australia, and New Zealand. At the beginning of the 20th century, about half of the population of Wales spoke Welsh as an everyday language. Towards the end of the century, the proportion of Welsh speakers had fallen to about 20%. According to the 2001 census, 582,368 people can speak Welsh. 659,301 people can either speak, read or write Welsh, and 797,717 people, 28% of the population, claimed to have some knowledge of the language. According to a survey carried out by S4C, the Welsh language TV channel, the number of Welsh speakers in Wales is around 750,000, and about 1.5 million people can understand Welsh. In addition, there are an estimated 133,000 Welsh speakers living in England, about 50,000 of them in the Greater London area.
For better or worse, we live in a world profoundly affected by Sigmund Freud. If I had to ask you to name a famous psychologist, the answer of most of you would be Freud. He was the most famous psychologist ever, and he had a profound influence on the 20th and 21st century. Some biographical information: he was born in the 1850s. He spent most of his life in Vienna, Austria, But he died in London, and he escaped to London soon after, retreating there at the beginning of World War II as the Nazis began to occupy where he lived. He was one of the most famous scholars ever, but he was not known for any single discovery. Instead, he was known for the development of an encompassing theory of mind, one that he developed over the span of many decades. Indeed, the library. We've all been to a historic library. We've all enjoyed the smell of a historic library. But what is it? And what does it mean? When at UCL Center for Sustainable Heritage, we've recently been asked to assess the environment at another historical library at St. Paul's Cathedral, the Wren Library, an incredible place. And it has such an intensive smell of old books. And we were also asked for the first time. Really, I was actually taken aback by the brief. We were asked, "What you do, please preserve the smell. It is so important to our audience. It is so important how people perceive the library." So, that was quite an important message in our research. And indeed, the smell is an important way of how we communicate with the environment. This piece of research was done by an advertising company because advertisers are so interested in how we interact with each other and the environment. And we see that the majority of people use sight obviously to interact with the environment, but on the second place, we see the smell is also very, very important. The Skoog is a new university-accessible musical instrument. It is designed to use by children or adults with special needs, or in fact be used by anyone. It's soft, it's easy to play, it's robust, and it can be customized to suit anyone's abilities. The Skoog helps students with special needs by allowing them to get involved in making music themselves. It's an instrument that they can play it and they can take ownership of and start creating their own sounds and music. Traditional instruments are the shape and size and made of the materials they are because of the sound that they need to make. If you want to make a sound like a plucked string, you need a string and it needs to be under tension, whereas with a Skoog, because it's a mixture of software and a sensor, then thus the computer can handle making the sound. And so we can design an object that's designed to be touched and designed to be played with. In developing the screen and working with kids in the schools and in the classrooms, it's really helped us make the Chowk something that's usable by the children themselves. They've informed us massively on how it needs to work, and they've given their opinions on colors and designs. And just the feedback they've given to us has been just marvelous. It's just so enriching, and it's really inspiring to actually work with these kids, particularly when you can provide them with an ability to start to playing their own music as opposed to just taking part through listening to other musicians and really learning from. In today's lecture, I'm going to talk about changes in air pollution since the middle of the last century and what has created these changes. So, by the 1950s, air pollution was very visible with frequent thick black fogs known as smogs in many large cities around the world. The main source of this pollution was from factories, and it caused severe health problems. For example, a particularly severe smog in London in 1952 caused over 4,000 deaths. Obviously, something had to be done, and in 1956 a Clean Air Act was introduced in Britain. This addressed the pollution from factories, and the smog soon disappeared. However, as you know, these days air pollution is still a big issue. The main difference between now and the 1950s is that you can't see it, it's invisible. Also, the main source of pollution now is from cars and lorries, and although these don't produce visible signs, this air pollution is still a significant risk to health. And one of the key factors in the rise of this type of pollution is that we have all become much more vehicle dependent. The Western countries' women are becoming more and more reluctant to give birth to babies. However, the male status in society remains as strong as it ever has in recent years. The birth rates increased during 20th century, but it starts to decrease over these last 2 decades. In the year 2000, as an example, the birth rate remained at around 1%. There are even some negative birth rates in other countries. Birth rates dropped to its lowest point that has never been seen in the society. It also has impacts on male in the society, especially young men, and it might have some connection with unemployment rates as well. Most Americans take energy for granted. But, for many families, maintaining access to reliable and affordable energy is a persistent challenge and a significant material hardship. This is a problem referred to as energy insecurity, and it affects millions of American households each year. We have found that energy insecurity is a growing and vexing problem among low-income households, and the COVID-19 pandemic has made this problem worse. Our analysis finds that there are disparities in rates of energy insecurity across various socio-demographic groups. Black and Hispanic households, for example, are significantly more likely to experience energy insecurity and face utility disconnection than white households. So too are households with young children, individuals that require electronic medical devices, and those in dwellings with inefficient or poor conditions. Households that cannot pay for energy are unable to power electronic learning or medical devices, keep perishable, healthy food in the refrigerator, or maintain safe body temperatures. Last week, we talked about how people recognize objects and really how well people recognize objects, given how difficult the problem is, given how objects can be seen in all different sorts of illumination, in different positions, in different angles. And yet we are able to extract that information, we are able to take the visual stuff out there, interpret it in a way that allows us to recognize all the different things that we can see in our environment. Today we're gonna kind of carry on looking at that, but we're gonna look at what's really a special class of objects. That's the human face. So we're gonna look at how we recognize human faces, and how we do it quite as well as we do. We're really expert at recognizing faces. So again we can think about how do we take that visual information and how do we transform it into a form which allows us to put a name to a face, and to do all the other clever things that we can do with faces. So I'm gonna start off again by just pointing out that it's a hard problem. Face recognition is a hard problem, and it's a clever thing we do. If you think about all the different types of faces you can recognize, and all the different types of information you can get from the face, you kind of start to appreciate how well we can do face recognition. There comes a time in a desert ant's life when a piece of food is too large to ignore, but too heavy to lift, and the only way to get it home is to adopt a new style of walking. The long-legged and speedy Cataglyphus fortis normally covers ground with a three-legged stride that moves two legs forwards on one side, and one on the other. For the next step, the insect mirrors the move with its other 3 legs. But recordings of ants in the Tunisian desert reveal that when faced with oversized lumps of food 10 times their own weight, the forward tripod walking style is abandoned. Unable to lift the morsels in their mandibles, the ants drag the food backwards instead, moving all 6 legs independently. This is the first time we have seen this in any ants, said lead author Sarah Pfeffer at the University of Ulm in Germany. The ants' long legs already help keep their bodies away from the scorching desert floor and enable them to speed around at up to 60 centimeters per second. Think of Usain Bolt, who has very long legs compared to body size. The desert floor is also very hot, so the further away their bodies are from the surface, the better, said co-author Matthias Wittlinger. The ants have also evolved to function at body temperatures of 50 C in a desert where temperatures can soar to 70 C. They're basically just trying to get out of the heat, he added. 30. A picture of Flinders Station and a female speaker speaking fast. Melbourne is a beauty city, but can be better. Industrialization is mentioned, which has changed people's lives. People used to go to only near places, but now people who don't have their own vehicles can go further because public transportation help them travel long distance. It's important to do. Diversity contributes a lot to the market and its culture.